Hi folks, Ryan Mann here with Sotheby's International Realty, and I'm here with my very good friend, Rob Foos from Sparrow Mortgage.
Pleasure to meet you, and thank you for having me, Ryan.
Absolutely. We're in a car at a beach. Undisclosed location, happens to be disclosed now as Chappaquiddick Beach.
I thought we were geotagging this, so it's going to be very public.
Yeah, there we go. We're going to geotag this. We're going to leave breadcrumbs all the way.
Leave breadcrumbs and leave it how we found it.
Absolutely.
Take nothing but memories.
No, absolutely. And
video.
But it is really cool if you haven't been to this beach. It is a town beach here in Falmouth. Not only demographics wise, I find a lot of folks from the Worcester area lived in the East Falmouth area, and they you know, you go there's a lot of people that came from that general vicinity. Whereas, you know, Outer Cape, you might have people that are further away, New York, New Jersey, because it's just so much more to get there. And versus if you're in, you know, a suburb of Worcester, it's less than 2 hours to get to Falmouth, you know, versus another hour to get to Wellfleet. So that's one of the big differences in terms of demographics. The other thing is the year-round population changes per town. So you might have a very, very lonely winter if you live in Wellfleet, right? Versus there's a lot of vibrant community events and a lot of vibrant community stuff going on in the winter in a place like Falmouth, because we have such a higher percentage of year-round population. So that's one of the big differences. The other big difference, obviously, is location, right? So because we are literally surrounded by water like an island, the dynamics with our saltwater environment constantly affect how we're affected, right? So even if you're not a waterfront house, there are areas of the Cape that are deeply affected by storm surge and stormwater. I'm thinking of Dennisport, for example, where the flood zones can go 3 miles in because of how flat and how things kind of meander through that town. So while you might not be, you know, right on Buzzards Bay or Nantucket Sound, you may be in a very quiet neighborhood of small cottages and still be in the flood zone 2 miles away from the water. So it's something to think about and something to know before you purchase.
Oh, absolutely. And in those initial conversations that you're having with clients thinking about buying a house on Cape, what are some of those initial questions that you tend to get, or answers that you're providing to help them hone in on where they would like to be?
Well, what I often ask my clients is, what are your goals, right? Are your goals to retire here on the Cape? Are your goals here to have a summer place for legacy for generations to be able to come down and enjoy? Are you looking to move with your family for work? And so you'll be here year round? Those questions kind of help to craft where we're going to look, right? Obviously, budget is a big part of that. You know, as much as things have increased everywhere, the Cape is not immune from those increases. But I'll tell you, if you were somebody who had a home, you know, outside of Boston, you could be looking like this is a deal here on Cape Cod. And a lot of folks are. They cash out of their home that was in, you know, Billerica or someplace up near the city, Newton. They get this big wad of cash, even if they hadn't lived in their house more than 10 years. And they're able to not only buy a quality home here on Cape Cod that meets their needs for less, but then they have all this extra cash that they either can live on or invest in another property, or just have a retirement secured while staying here in Massachusetts. Very, very cool thing.
Yes. And looking at, you know, people that have property somewhere else and they're moving to the Cape. You represent both buy side and sell side.
I do. Yep.
What are some of the things that you tend to find pop up on inspections? Property inspections?
So, you know, inspections are a very interesting thing. When I first got into real estate, you know, I was very particular about who my inspectors that I worked with were, and you should be, because not everybody's equal, just like not every realtor's equal, not like every doctor's equal or every teacher's equal, right? And so finding out what the knowledge base of your inspector is really important. I find a lot of folks think they're going to save money by having their contractor friend try to be their inspector. Well, that contractor friend, even though they bought a bunch of houses, may not necessarily be able to look at it in a certain eye with a checklist and knowing everything that needs to be checked, every outlet, every code, everything like that. And it's more like the difference between a general practitioner in terms of a doctor and a hand surgeon.
Yes.
Right? They're going to look at it a different way. Not necessarily of what you can do to improve it, but what are the conditions on the ground to make sure that safety and structurally the house is safe. So what things come up all the time? Roofs. We have a lot of people that are from other places that look at a roof and say, well, it's a 30-year roof and it's only 20 years into it. I got 10 more years. That's not necessarily the case.
Insert maritime environment.
Yes. Salt air, the wind that we get that a lot of other places don't get because of the protection either from hills or from large trees. We don't have a lot of that stuff. So you have a velocity even miles inland that could potentially degrade the roof a lot quicker. I've even heard of some insurance companies failing roofs that are only 10 years old, over 10 years old. And it's because the harsh environment that we live in really does take its toll on the exterior of a home. So definitely roofs are something that often come up. The foundation are another thing. It's not so much that foundations crack or things move, but we're on sand. So it's basically like, in many places, putting a house on a bed of marbles, right? And so that movement, it may make it so that things don't settle quite evenly, or that there's water intrusion in certain places, because it's not just pure sand. You'll have silt and clay that might be pointed towards the house, and then therefore you basically have a waterfall that you don't know about coming towards that concrete foundation, causing water issues. So those are typical things that we see a lot of. The other thing that I think people just need to be aware of if they're moving to Cape Cod, because of the moisture in the air, the humidity that we receive in the summertime, basements typically have some sort of dehumidifying system. And so just because you have a damp or moist or a dehumidifier in the basement, not up to standards. It's just, that's how houses are maintained here on the Cape. Yeah.
And important to note, these are things to keep an eye out for, and one of the reasons why it's important to have that inspection period, hire an inspector to look at homes. Not every home has a roof issue or a foundation issue, but just these are some of the things to keep an eye on that you may not find necessarily in other places or other states, for that matter.
Right. And I look at the inspection also as a great way to learn about your house. Maybe you've owned 3 or 4 houses. You know what a small renovation project, a kitchen or a bath might look like. You don't know where the water lines go or the electrical. How does the electrical work? A lot of people don't know how septics work because they're not used to that. They're from away and maybe they have town sewer. We have very small percentage still on the Cape that have that town sewer. So, these are ways for your inspector to help you learn about your home and what to expect.
And you mentioned septic. It's especially for those that have watched the Cape Cod market for a while, there's certainly been a lot of headlines recently about septic systems on the Cape. How is it that you navigate those and educate your clients on the regulations that are coming into play and how that might impact their buying experience?
I think the first thing when it comes to septics, you're right. There's a lot of folks that are coming from away that might be very, very used to just flushing the toilet or leaving the sink and the water goes away. It goes into a central system that you don't have to ever worry about. Septics are an on-site wastewater treatment system that do need maintenance. So the first thing is make sure that you have your septic pumped. Like I like to say, every 4 years, just like our...
Depends on family size, depends on usage.
Yep. But basically every 4 years, basically I like to tell people when we elect a new president, pump your septic.
It's going to be voting a presidential election.
And for the same reason, right? Yeah, there we go. Outside of that, you know, septics can last 50 years, right?
And I guess it's also worth pointing out, especially for our out-of-state buyers, that it is required, if there is a septic or a cesspool, that when a property changes hands, for there to be an inspection.
Yep.
It falls under Title V in Massachusetts, the Title V code, so we call it a Title V inspection.
Right. And in a lot of towns now, cesspools are automatic failures.
Automatic fails.
So that usually means that there's going to be some upgrade. Now, there is a movement to get a lot more towns, a lot of more units on central sewer, where they're putting big pipes down roads, hooking up every house on that road, and now it's treated to a higher degree in a central location, right? It's extremely expensive. A lot of people have felt very strongly about it.